Aloha, good afternoon, everybody. So I guess we have the honor of closing out the show today and standing in between you and the wire Pauhana. So we're here today at a pivotal moment in Hawaii's energy transition. This panel, DER Pathways to Hawaii's Renewable Energy Goals, will explore near-term milestones and goals that have recently been set, as well as long-term strategies to meet our statewide commitments. Namely, the 100% renewable energy goal, but also two other critical near-term targets that have recently been established by our policymakers and leaders. We'll focus on three core challenges and opportunities: scaling distributed solar and energy storage, or DERs, ensuring affordability, equity, and access in this transition, and then navigating emerging state and federal policy risks and threats that have recently come up that we'll get into. Our discussion is anchored by three major policy directives. The first is the PUC's 2024 inclinations, which offers a roadmap for grid modernization, resilience, and DER integration, and is an update from the 2014 inclinations. The second is Governor Green's recent Executive Order 2501, which sets a goal of installing 50,000 new DER systems by 2030, prioritizing low and moderate income households, and accelerating grid reforms. And of course, Hawaii's 2045 goal of 100% renewable energy and net carbon negativity. We'll focus on grid electricity in this discussion. This path is, of course, not without obstacles, from regulatory inertia and permitting delays to the sunset of Hawaii's solar tax credit, HB 796, which recently got through the legislature in 2025, and federal proposals to weaken and eliminate sections 25D, 48E, 45Y, and 25C from our Internal Revenue Code, essentially eliminating the Inflation Reduction Act, repealing the Inflation Reduction Act, And just in the wee hours of this morning, the House passed a budget reconciliation, which now is on its way over to the Senate, which is a direct and imminent threat to our investment tax credits that are one of the main foundations of our energy policy. To help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by three leaders at the forefront of efforts in Hawaii to transform our grid. PUC Commissioner Colin Yost has served as a commissioner at the Hawaii PUC since November 2022 and was previously part owner and COO of Hawaii's solar company Revolusun and a practicing attorney. Kylie Cruz is an attorney with Earthjustice. She represents the solar industry and community groups in various PUC dockets and other cases focused on a just and equitable transition to 100% clean energy. Brad Albert is the vice president of Nexamp. Nexamp is a leading community solar development company in Hawaii and across the country. And so Brad has experience starting a solar company in 2008, was it? Rising Sun Solar here on Maui. So he's a local boy.
Does this work?
Yeah.
I started in 2002.
Thank you. That's why we write things down. And I'm Rocky Mould, by the way. I am the executive director of the Hawaii Solar Energy Association. We advocate before the Public Utilities Commission, the legislature, the county councils, and other bodies for solar policies that help us reach Hawaii's renewable energy goals. So let's dive in. For this agenda, we're going to start it off with a couple questions for our panelists, and it's about a 40-minute discussion. Then we'll go to audience Q&A, and then we'll have a final statement. Colin, the PUC's inclinations call DERs an underutilized but critical resource. What steps is the Commission taking, especially through new tariffs like BYOD and grid services, to accelerate DER adoption and operationalize their value?
Thank you, Rocky. And thanks, everyone, for still hanging in there at the last panel. Appreciate that very much. And before I answer the question, I'd like to give a quick pitch to those inclinations that Rocky mentioned. They are easy to find on the PUC website if you know how to navigate our website, which actually is just to go to the website, look at the search little area there in the top right-hand corner, enter the word inclinations, and our commission inclinations will pop right up. Both the 2014 inclinations and our more recent 2024 inclinations issued in December are right there, and you can read them. I highly recommend them to everyone if you want to know what the commissioners are thinking regarding energy in Hawaii in the future, at least between now and 2030. So to answer the question in regards to DERs, they are essential to figuring out how we get to 100% faster, to accelerate away from oil, which is a problem in numerous ways, not just from an environmental standpoint, but also an affordability standpoint. And the three things that we are focused on right now in terms of accelerating adoption of DERs, first, we've just approved a new tariff called BYOD Plus, that's Bring Your Own Device Plus. It was an attempt to substantially improve the BYOD 1 program that was kind of showed up to collective disappointment, I should think, when it was initiated a little more than a year ago. So BYOD Plus launched officially on May 15th. It's almost like a battery bonus in terms of the incentive structure, not quite as rich, but it is a very substantial incentive. And we also, within the next couple of days, are going to issue a letter creating a working group to establish the program that comes immediately after BYOD Plus, because this is just, we recognize it's just an interim step to getting somewhere that's much more useful to ratepayers and to the utilities. And that would be a full-fledged remote dispatch, virtual power plant type program, somewhat similar perhaps to what they're already doing in Massachusetts called the Connected Solutions Program, although we're going to need to take a close look at what really makes sense for Hawaii and not just adopt what's happening in Massachusetts. But that has enabled the utilities on the East Coast to truly turn these diverse and widely dispersed small resources into a fully dispatchable, aggregated resource that acts a lot more like a power plant, a lot more reliably, and a lot more on call when the grid really needs it. In Massachusetts, their program, they only use it maybe 30 to 60 times a year. So it's less burdensome on the consumer. They don't worry as much about the battery being used by the utility during a time when the consumer might want to rely on it for their own personal resilience. It really is used just when the grid truly needs it. So that's good for the consumer. And it also, the compensation levels start to become, we think, more palatable to all involved. It should be clearer what the true value to the grid is of that type of service that is much more useful to the utility than the service that we now have with scheduled dispatch, where it just happens every day in a certain time period, 365 days a year, whether the grid needs it or not. So we have great hopes for that. And then the third thing is really figuring out how to dramatically encourage upgrades and improvements to the legacy DER systems that exist, of which there are at least 600 megawatts out there of DER systems that do not have any energy storage, do not have advanced inverters attached to them. And if we can upgrade those systems and integrate all of them into a virtual power plant, grid services, remote dispatch type of functionality, that will be enormously useful to the grid and also greatly enhance the individual resilience of everyone who has those systems attached to their houses. So that's our immediate focus on that issue.
Thanks, Colin. Kylie, despite strong RPS targets and a really large percentage of DERs already on our grid, DERs have been marginalized a bit in practice in terms of grid planning. What policy or regulatory changes are needed to better align utility planning with DER potential and to ensure it in a just and equitable way?
Well, I'll start off by answering your question with a little history. So as many of you know, Hawaii has among the strongest clean energy laws in the country, mandating 100% clean energy by 2045. But the law doesn't have any specifics on the specific path that we take to get there. The NEM program, which allowed a 1-to-1 credit for renewable energy production to the grid, was Hawaii's greatest clean energy success story. It put DERs on the map as the largest single source of renewable energy in Hawaii. After the PUC ended the NEM program in 2015, we spent the last 10 years struggling to get our footing in developing programs that actually incentivize rooftop solar and battery contributions to the grid. We've also been involved in the utility planning process, and we've noticed that in all iterations of the plans, there seems to be a tendency, the plans are skewed toward utility scale resources and less toward DERs. But at the same time, HECO and HSCO have acknowledged that at least for Oahu, we need rooftop solar on every roof in order to meet our clean energy goals. HECO, they do plan on building out utility scale solar and other renewable resources massively in the near term. And I think that these plans and ambitious goals are justified. But as we've seen last year and in recent years, a lot of these projects have not gone through, unfortunately. On the other hand, we do have an example of how DERs can fill the void to meet capacity needs on the grid. So the battery bonus program, for example, allowed for around 50 megawatts of rooftop solar plus batteries to be installed and contribute to the grid within just a few years. And so we really hope that the governor's executive order and the PUC's inclinations will set us on track to dramatically accelerate DER adoption. So as Rocky mentioned, we have the executive order, which sets a target for 50,000 DER systems to be added before 2030. And then the PUC has a goal of 400 megawatts by 2030 of DERs. And what we really need is programs and policies in place that are simple to understand and provide adequate compensation to incentivize adoption. And just to put this in perspective, I mean, 50,000 in 5 years, sometimes it takes the PUC and all the stakeholders 5 years just to develop a program. So my main theme and point for today is that we don't have that amount of time to be debating over what the program should look like. We need to focus on simple programs with really good value proposition for adoption, and we need those in place now.
Thanks, Kylie. Brad, from your work on VPPs and community solar across multiple states, what are the key design elements? Compensation, simplicity, customer trust that actually make these programs successful?
Thanks, Rocky. And I guess just aloha to everyone out there. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully a few of you will ask questions because there's not that many people left to ask questions. So as you hear us talk, please ask questions. Before I dive in a little bit, I was just going to mention that, I owned a solar company here for 16 years. We did residential and commercial solar systems, primarily on Maui, but on all islands. And then I left my company, did some different things, but I stood up Swell's GSPA, which is a VPP program in Hawaii, and then went on to work at the U.S. Department of Energy at the Loan Programs Office in the VPP program division. And the reason I'm saying that is that I feel like my experience is great in solar. I've been in solar a long time, but I've really been focused on VPPs now for the last several years, and I think I've got a good feel for it. And so to just point out, like Colin did, there's a few foundational documents that everyone, if they're interested in VPP, should look at. It was mentioned yesterday on the panel. It's the VPP liftoff report, which was published by the U.S. Department of Energy. And again, if you just type in a search, VPP liftoff report, U.S. Department of Energy, it should come right up on any search. And that's I think a foundational document. It's gone through an update recently, so it's pretty up to date as of less than a year ago. And in that document, that's kind of the how. That's the why. Like, VPPs are good, we should do them, and in fact, we need to do them nationally to meet our energy goals. And the reason that is that similar to what Kylie was saying, we can build power plants and we can build new facilities, but they take time. VPPs is an energy resource that we can just turn on because the resources exist. We just need to enable them. And so while I was working there, this is the second document, I spearheaded an initiative to create a model tariff for VPPs. So that's out there, and it was sponsored by Solar United Neighbors. And if you type in Solar United Neighbors VPP model tariff, it'll take you right to it. And so now sort of moving forward, like the tenets of the VPP model tariff are that you have a standard offer open access tariff based approach that allows integrators to participate. So as that relates to Hawaii, that would allow customers to assign their payments to a third party. And this is important because a large share of the market is owned by third-party aggregators. And again, if we can allow the third-party aggregators to benefit by allowing customers to assign their payments to them, then we unlock a significant amount of megawatts in the market. Secondly, you need to compensate the customers equitably for the services they're providing. And incentives need to motivate customers. So in the panel yesterday, the example that was given, which I thought was really good, was like if he was the sort of explaining to his daughter. Brian Gold was explaining to his daughter like how VPPs work, and it's like if you were going to borrow my car from 7 to 9, but in Colin's new model, it would be like, I want to borrow your car sometime during the day. Well, you might charge more now if it was any time versus just from 7 to 9. But what would you what would you get compensated? And that would be somewhere in the like his daughter said, well, I'd want to get paid for gas. And he's like, well, that just brings you up to present. Like, that's just like obvious, you need to get paid for gas, but there's insurance, there's your car payment, whatever. So it's really just about finding that price that's fair to the ratepayers, but is also going to motivate that customer to want to contribute their battery. So that's number 2. And then below that, like performance-based payments we feel are better. And again, from yesterday's panel, $1.25 per kilowatt hour in Puerto Rico moved the market. Here, under battery bonus, we saw $850 upfront payment move the market, as well as a $5 per month per kilowatt performance-based payment. So the model tariff basically says performance-based payments are better. You can have an upfront payment, but you need to motivate customers. And I think what Kylie was saying is like, let's not overly debate these incentives. Let's try and really put something out there that gets people to enroll. And last, you need to have retail crediting for grid services, which in my example is like, you got to pay for the gas. So that's all I really have. No, I already gave the website where you can find the document. Thanks, Rocky.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, those tenets, those principles are ones that we actually employed here in Hawaii when we advocated for the current grid services programs here in Hawaii on the part of HSEA. So I'm going to pull it back. So what's really exciting about what we've been talking about, these are like local policies. This is Hawaii taking control of its own destiny and designing programs that are going to push the needle and get us to our goals, which is so important. Right now, we are facing, as I mentioned before, some threats to our progress, some really significant threats to our progress. A bill passed at the Hawaii legislature, HB 796, that would sunset Hawaii's foundational renewable energy technologies income tax credit after 5 years, or actually beginning immediately one-third, one-third, one-third over 3 years, depending on how you read the law. So there's some ambiguity in that law that's really scary for industry, because that tax credit really drives adoption and provides sort of a floor for us, and it's so important to Hawaii's goals. Additionally, just last night, in the wee hours of the morning, the House Budget Reconciliation Package, or bill, passed that has an immediate elimination of the residential home efficiency and solar tax credit, as well as an elimination of the ability for leasing options to get tax credits at the federal level, and then a sunset of the commercial tax credits. So my question to the panel, so this is really a threat to us and a threat to the financial foundation supporting our efforts. To our panelists, how would the loss of Hawaii's solar tax credit, alongside these proposed federal tax credit cuts and repeals, how would those affect financing, local installers, and the future of DERs and community solar in Hawaii? And I'll start with you, Brad.
Thanks, Rocky. I actually played hooky from the conference and attended a SIA webinar today on the latest draft of the House bill, and they laid it out pretty well. But to answer like big picture here, I could get into some details because I think some of the details might be important to people, and they're all new as of yesterday or today, this morning. But really, without a federal tax credit, first point, a lot of projects wouldn't move forward. Without an incentive from the federal government as well as the state government, I think no projects will move forward, at least not for some time. And then on top of all of that, the triple threat is we're having, there's tariffs on all the projects. So in my current role as a developer for Nexamp doing community solar, we're planning to do projects, and in the financial model, we're showing we don't get to take the state tax credit on those projects, actually. So that's not part of it. So we're only relying on the federal tax credit, but we thought we could buy equipment for whatever price we thought, and then suddenly it was 130% tariffs on Chinese equipment. Now all of our projects are what they call domestic content projects. And although we're buying over 50% of the content of the project is domestic made components, it's still going to bring the prices up, because now there's going to be more demand on those U.S. content projects because there's tariffs on foreign products. So it's supply and demand, prices are going to rise. Then overnight they said, oh, those are just 30% tariffs. But still, a 30% increase is a 30% increase on what you plan to do the project for. And now if you take away another 30% federal tax credit, all of a sudden, it's just, there's no way you can make that project work, at least not for the price that you bid in. So I'm sort of staying calm, but I actually feel like punching my fist through the wall, because literally this, simply put, is the people that bought the government's way of putting solar out of business for the benefit of oil. That's what's going on here. This is not behind closed doors. This is not a small change. This is literally we're going to end solar overnight, And the only alternative is oil. And by the way, there's not enough power from oil to meet the US energy needs. So I think the only action that we can take is like, well, what can we do here? Well, we have a state tax credit. Let's not get rid of it. Like, we need to veto HB 796. Rock, you can help me out with the URL where people can go to write. We kind of have a website where people can ask to veto that bill. But now, more than ever, if we don't even have a state tax credit, we don't have a solar market, period.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, we're going to send out an email helping people out with that. That's being developed right now, that URL, as we speak. This is very new news, but yeah, we are mobilizing significantly to fight these initiatives that we're facing. Any of the other panelists want to jump in on this topic of this immediate threat that we're facing? Colin?
Is this still on? Yeah. Clearly, it's a huge threat, but obviously we shouldn't give up, and we've got to get our senators to step up, as they have done in the past, to support the solar industry, to support Hawaii's ability to generate its own homegrown energy from the sun. So they've had success in the past. This is a different, even more chaotic environment than what they've dealt with, but nonetheless, we got to support them. We cannot give up. We've got to fight harder than ever before. And on the state level, I completely agree generally. I mean, tax policy is not the purview of the PUC, but speaking personally, I think that as a state, we should do everything we can to support our state goals. And it doesn't make sense to take steps backward, especially if we are in an environment where things have gotten harder and less supportive on the federal level.
Sorry, just to add on, so there is a website to, if you want to voice your opinions for the federal tax credit, which is solarpowers with an S, america.org. If you go to that website, and I think over 20,000 responses have already reached the senators that are now going to vote on this bill. So while I said this federal tax credit is being ended, there's an attempt to end it. There's a bill that's passed the House. It still has to go to the Senate. We still have a voice, and everyone needs to raise their voice. Same thing on the state level.
Thanks, Brad.
I'll just add that removing the tax credit at the state level also is inconsistent with Governor Green's executive order, which ultimately envisions having solar on every rooftop by 2045.
Great. Thank you. So moving on to our next topic, we're going to move to, and by the way, again, I'm heartened by the fact that we're doing everything that we can at the local level through new DER programs to do what we can. We do need to make sure that HB 796 gets vetoed. That's really important in that effort. So shifting gears, part of our conversation today is about how, as we transition to 100% renewable energy, as we build these 50,000 new solar arrays on rooftops in the next 5 years, how do we do that and include everyone? How do we do that and maintain affordability and equity? Now, I would say, the more renewable energy that we add onto our system overall, the more affordable our system gets, and that's been sort of proven over time. But there are transition costs along the way, of course. So, Colin, how will the Commission ensure that DER growth, particularly the governor's 50,000 system goal, includes meaningful participation from low and moderate income households?
Thanks. And just to respond quickly also to something Kylie said earlier, I completely agree that we can't spend too much time deliberating. We've got to act, and that is also a big focus of the 2024 inclinations, is that we need to be nimble, we have to move quicker, and be unafraid of trying new things. So the Connected Solutions or VPP working group that's going to be established, the intent is to have a very short working group, like a working group that gets some real information and guidance to the PUC within 4 months, we hope, so that we can establish a formal docket proceeding and our goal will be to try to get something up and running literally by the middle of 2026, so around June 2026. We'd like the entire PUC part of the process to be complete by that time, and we're going to push hard to achieve that result. So we're not going to spend as much time deliberating some of these things as we have in the past. There's no way we can do that and succeed in getting to where we need to be by 2030. So in terms of equity in these programs, the most recent order regarding BYOD Plus, pushes hard on offering a greater benefit, a significantly greater benefit to low and moderate income ratepayers than others who are not qualifying in that category. It's twice as much. It's $4,000 a battery essentially, which is pretty close to the level at the battery bonus incentive. So that was deliberate. It's seeking to encourage in fairly obvious ways the solar industry to move out and focus more of their marketing and sales attention on low and moderate income customers who have not benefited from the installation of these systems as often as the early adopters who were more well-heeled. So that greater financial incentive we hope will make it a win-win for everybody. We hope to continue that same philosophy of incentivizing at a higher level low and moderate income ratepayers when we work on building the virtual power plant grid services program. And then another thing that we're looking at as well is other creative ways that the PUC can help the GEMS program be more successful. That program, as you may know, offers financing, no matter what your credit score might be, to anyone who's trying to get PV on their house. And they don't have enough resources. The PUC is looking at ways to try to find out how to supplement or improve their access to capital. So that's what we're working on now.
And I'll say another really important part of the recent order that the PUC issued was expanding the eligibility requirements for the LMI adder in BYOD Plus to align with the GEMS definition, which is a huge, hugely important improvement to the program. So in that light of aligning what you guys are doing with GEMS more closely. We also have community-based renewable energy as a means to provide equity in our transition. So Brad and Kylie, you guys have been involved with community-based renewable energy in no uncertain terms in sort of different angles. Brad, you're actually implementing projects and negotiating projects. Kylie, you were involved in the creation of the program in the regulatory process over these years. CBRE Phase 2 has underperformed. What would be a redesigned, more inclusive model? What would it look like, especially for ensuring real savings for LMI customers? Kylie, why don't we start with you?
Well, I will just say that working on the CBRE program has been a source of a lot of frustration. It was one of the first dockets I started working on when I started working at the PUC. The reason it all came about because the legislature's Act 100 passed in 2015, and it directed HECO to develop a CBRE tariff program. And the whole legislative intent behind it was to dramatically expand the benefits of renewable energy to a broader range of customers, including LMI customers, people who live in apartment buildings and multi-unit dwellings. And so the whole vision was just a simple tariff to dramatically expand the market. Since then, the program has suffered from what my boss, Isaac Moriwake, likes to call program-itis. The planning process for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the program spanned around over 5 years. And what we ended up with was a far cry from a tariff. It was a program that involved complex rules, forms, and processes, a competitive bidding process for larger projects, complicated subscriber compensation structures, and a lot of delays associated with interconnections and inflated project costs. So after all of these years, according to HECO's website, there are 5 CBRE projects online that total around 4 megawatts. So here we are, 10 years later, we have 4 megawatts. And I think what we really need, I mean, CBRE projects are inherently equitable projects, and they can be designed with credit adders for LMI customers. But what we really need to do is start from scratch, move quickly, and develop a program that's simple. I would love to have a tariff and avoid the competitive bidding process, credit adders for LMI customers, and just adequate incentives in general for folks to participate. They're really unique types of projects where it's not quite like a regular utility scale project, and it's not really a rooftop solar project either. And so we just need to find the right balance that embodies simplicity and adequate compensation. We've heard that the PUC is planning on looking at CBRE again in the coming months. HECO has its own ideas for how to improve the program. Ulupono has ideas as well. And what we could really use support in is getting developer input by folks who've worked to develop CBRE projects about how can we make this program better? How can we make it succeed as the legislature originally intended? And I just wanted to circle back to the points we were talking about earlier with Commissioner Yost. We have in the DER docket proposed a suite of DER programs designed and aimed at benefiting LMI customers. So like virtual self-consumption for LMI customers, DER credit donation programs for LMI customers, some flavor of NEM program for affordable housing, and controllable water heating for LMI customers as well. And so these are all ideas that we floated, and we hope that in future rounds of DER, the PUC will consider them.
Thanks. And just for everyone, CBRE, if I didn't bring it up earlier, my apologies. CBRE is community-based renewable energy. So it's community solar, shared solar farms. Brad, from
Sure.
a development perspective, what can you say about CBRE or community solar in practice in Hawaii?
Well, totally agree with both Kylie and Colin in terms of like, I think that, the programs that Nexamp or the projects that Nexamp was awarded were based on an RFP process. And we've still not been able to sign those PPAs with HECO for a variety of reasons. I don't think I'm able to talk about a lot of them because of confidentiality, but suffice it to say that like it's not a standard form contract. And so if you start negotiating a contract, it just complicates things and adds cost. Making CBRE a tariff-based program with a capacity limit and a known standard form contract that's tailored to CBRE, I think is like the probably most important thing to do. But within that, there's like certain devil in the details type things. And the current, again, I don't know, like because these are, I think this is across the board. There's no floor or standard for the savings that the LMI customers get under the current program. And aligning that with like Solar for All and GEMS would be like, I think, good. Like, let's define what an LMI customer is. And then if we want to provide benefits, let's be clear about what those benefits are, because like I believe that like 20% savings as a floor is what Solar for All requires, and that might be a good place to start. But it could be more, because when you really look at what LMI customers save on their bill with 10 to 15% savings, which is currently kind of like where it's at, it's really not enough to make enough impact in their energy bill to provide what we're, the goal that we're trying to achieve, which is energy relief for people that have a high energy burden. Then the energy burden being the ratio between their income to what they're paying for electricity. So that's, I think, the biggest point I wanted to make. And then that payment that they're getting, that benefit that they're getting, currently doesn't adjust over time. So it's not inflation adjusted. So the savings is based on a lump sum payment that it doesn't change. And so like it's going to like save them less money over time compared to their overall electricity bill. So making it inflation adjusted is another, I think, what I would call a detail. Customer payments need to be made on bill. Really, it's not like Hawaii's doing it wrong. I think nationally, most CBRE programs, you see a reduction in your bill, and then the aggregator, like my company, Nexamp, would then send another bill. And I think this is confusing for customers, but in Hawaii, it actually creates a tax on the LMI customers in this point for our programs, all LMI customers, because when customer purchases energy, in effect, from Nexamp, they have to pay the full GET. Whereas if HECO collects the money and then pays the aggregator, they only pay 0.5% GET. So we're leaving, close to 5% on the table there.
Thanks, Brad. Before we go further, it sounds like I want to get you involved with HSEA in our docket pleadings going forward as a member company. Colin, not to put you on the spot.
Sorry, I can stop because maybe I'm going too long, but if you want, I'll go through the rest, but go to Colin for sure.
So Colin, is CBRE reform on the commission agenda?
Yes. No, it's in the inclinations, and we emphasize the need for simplicity, the likely value of eliminating the subscriber organizations concept, putting things on bill, simplifying. That's all consistent with what they've been saying. But that process will begin in earnest in June. HECO's already committed to submit a new proposal for simplification in June, and we've also been working internally on our own proposed reforms. So we'll start rolling in the very near future and try to make significant progress as quickly as possible.
And the goal in the inclinations is 200 megawatts by 2030.
That's correct.
Just the only other point I wanted to make, which has been made in other panels, is that the interconnection costs for our projects are actually covered by the utility company. And I'm just recommending that be for all CBRE projects, because that will ensure that more of them actually get built, because that's a big uncertainty for developers. So if we could make that a standard, as well as like potentially citing the projects. And then so CBRE projects are like utility scale projects in that you have to develop land. So we face the same issues as other panels in this conference have mentioned about land use, agriculture versus solar. And so like anything to help, I think that the state could actually take even a closer look if they wanted to make it easier to develop smaller tracts of land, which CBRE projects are usually 3 to 6 megawatts, to allow those projects to move forward with more certainty around land use. So those were the two things: interconnection and land use. That I think again, details but important ones.
Thanks. A lot of detailed knowledge on CBRE in practice here in Hawaii. So thanks for that, Brad. I'm going to shift gears now to some audience questions. And this one that I have now it sort of fits in this spot. And the question is, are there limitations to implementing VPPs in Hawaii because of wheeling? Now, I'd like to open this up to maybe a bigger talk about wheeling and what that might mean for Hawaii as well, if someone wants to talk about that. Does anyone? Huh?
I don't think so. I think those two things will be distinct, largely. So I'm hopeful not. Obviously wheeling is a separate proceeding, and it has been influenced by recent legislation that was passed that we'll be meeting on June 24th as a commission with the parties to discuss the impact of that legislation. But I don't think it's going to change much about the VPP program.
I just say, like, conceptually, when you're doing a community solar project, you're wheeling to all of those customers, but that's just in concept. So I think, but in a way, like, there's a precedent for wheeling in that, like, that's what a CBRE program does in essence. The one thing that should be noted is that I think that the size limit for wheeling also is 2 megawatts. Is that right, Colin? So when you think about 2 megawatts and the cost to develop land, it may be more geared towards rooftop solar or parking structures. But the point really is, like, with wheeling, again, maybe it's not a concept that everyone's too familiar with, but you can generate power like on 1 TMK and then, wheel that power to another location. And so, like, there's a lot of land that is open that can be utilized, and there's a person that wants that power somewhere else. This just enables that and compensates HECO for wheeling the power between sites.
And just for context, the bill that passed this legislative session called for renewable electricity wheeling, and so it's up to the PUC proceeding to define what that is going forward. But that was SB 589. Going to the next question here. This one's for you, Brad. How do you see a 100% renewables look like in terms of actual units? Do you foresee keeping firm capacity baseload with renewables? Will you keep fossil fuel generation units as emergency generation? This might be.
It could be for all.
For all of you guys.
I think the 100% renewable goal is important and it's aspirational, but I think another panel talked about just getting to 75% by 2035. I think the last 5 to 10% is going to be really hard, and I think, like, having some baseload generation that's spinning is important, and how you power that. It's possible that over the next 10 years, technology is going to improve in all kinds of ways that we can't imagine. But I can say that, like, with a renewable dominant grid, having resources that are VPPs and battery resources that can respond quickly is essential. And so, like, I haven't seen a lot of battery-only projects proposed recently, but I think currently batteries are going to be key to being able to balance the grid as we get closer and closer to 100% renewable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't need to worry as much about that now. Like HNEI has said in this conference, that it'd be more productive probably to focus on getting to 70% and focus on really getting there. And then, once we're there, like, that's hard enough work as it is, then we can start working on what's next based on the best available technology at that time, because we cannot predict exactly what that will be today. So may as well work on what we are pretty sure is going to work. The grid should still function with 70% variable renewable supported by storage. And great, let's go for that. That's going to have an enormous impact on our exposure to the volatile oil market. It's absolutely absurd that we're burning oil to produce 70% of the electricity on Oahu. That's just, it's crazy. That's one of the impetuses for updating the inclinations by the commission, is we looked at what the commission said in 2014 regarding transforming the grid and in the resource mix, and looking at 10 years later, seeing the 70% number is still basically the same in terms of how much oil is being burned. That was frankly, outrageous just to think about that. Like, how have we not made more progress towards reducing that number? And yes, we got rid of coal, but coal happened to be our cheapest fossil fuel, also our most obviously polluting one. But oil didn't really get a dent at all. Like, we have to do the hard work of truly getting that number down.
Kylie?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that, reiterate what others said, is that last 5 years, or that last 5 to 10%, we will adjust based on what's available at that time. But right now, there's a lot of no regret strategies we can pursue in the near term that are commercially available.
Yeah, in the spirit of offering solutions, and again, what Hawaii can do, we've got a lot of headroom above us, is what I'm hearing, to move fast on interconnecting renewables and DERs in particular with these acceleration goals. So very exciting. Here's a question about CBRE. You mentioned developing land for CBRE projects. How about like developing CBRE projects for warehouses and other, rooftops and structures? Are there other target areas for CBRE projects in particular, multifamily dwellings, things like this?
I mean, I think if there's a load on site, typically like that offtake would want the load. But where I see the wheeling thing actually, I may be varying off of this question, but like you could develop a 3 megawatt CBRE project or whatever the limit's going to be, 6 megawatts, and you have enough land, you could then wheel another 2 megawatts off of that same site. And by combining that site for both wheeling and CBRE, you could probably lower the cost for the CBRE customer. So I do see some synergy there. In terms of rooftops, we just don't have a lot of big rooftops, and to develop a project on a, even up to a megawatt, the cost usually doesn't pencil out to like develop that project for CBRE. I think it's more of a ground-mounted project.
All right, I'll go to another question here. This one might be a little technical. If the LCOE, the levelized cost of energy of solar, is, say, 10 cents per kWh, what is the LCOE impact of the tariff or the tax credit loss given all other project development costs? How much would a PPA bid cost in dollars per kWh? How much would the PPA bid have to increase? And would the market pay for that in Hawaii?
So just to understand the question, I might be, I mean, I've been doing a lot of spreadsheets lately, literally on a daily basis. So I kind of have a feel for this. When you're developing like a CBRE site or a utility scale site, and you look at your costs, like your equipment cost is only a portion of your cost. So if you put a tariff on that, it's not like a one-to-one. Like if you have a 10% tariff, you're going to increase your cost by 10%. But it's probably in line with like whatever that equipment cost is a percentage of the project. And so, you multiply that by the tariff, and the same goes, but then when you look at like the impact of the tax credits, right, that's across all of the costs, as well as the revenue that you collect on that project over the lifetime of the project. So like a change in tax credit is really impactful, even more than the tariffs. But together, it's a complete poison pill.
So there's been a lot of talk of resilience hubs recently, particularly in light of the risks we face. Do you have anything to say about resilience hubs, and is there a role for them in what we're talking about in this DER acceleration agenda? Colin.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And the commission is committed to becoming more involved in helping. There's a lot of activity on resilience hubs from a number of different stakeholders and agencies, and that's all encouraging. But I think that one thing we worry about at the PUC is whether some of those efforts are too piecemeal. Like they might be providing backup power for a disaster shelter, but they may not be looking at other needs in that community that are likely to be serious and real in the case of a disaster. And as we saw with the tragedy in Lahaina, you had a complete breakdown in communications that lasted a long time. You had a lot of problems with the water system. You had issues with immediate food and just drinking water needs, first responder problems, and healthcare problems, along with shelter problems. Like all of that stuff happened at the same time. And I think resilience hubs, in order to be really effective, should be organized, should be designed to try to address all of those key essential problems to the greatest extent possible, which means you need a fairly substantial independent energy source that is going to be able to island and operate off-grid in the case of a grid outage. You're going to need that source to be connected to those other needs like healthcare and first responders and disaster shelters and ice, basic food, water pumps for essential water in the area. There's a lot of complex needs. But if we're looking at ways in which we can kind of leverage different benefits of things that we're doing together in order to make something more financeable. So, for example, if we're doing a CBRE project, if we're doing some kind of wheeling benefit, if we're doing some kind of resilience hub benefit, all of that stuff can theoretically be combined to make the whole project more valuable, and we can create other incentives. We can kind of spread that value around to encourage the development of these resources. So, I think that we're going to have to get really creative, obviously, if we just lose all federal support. But I think there are ways, and there are ways in which that creativity can result in the continuation of progress, and that's just something we're going to have to step up and try to accomplish.
Kylie?
Yes, I'll just add that the microgrids can provide multiple co-benefits, resiliency, supporting LMI communities, and so it's just important to make sure that in developing microgrid services programs that they are accounting for things like LMI by making them eligible for HGIA funding and allowing for LMI adders for the grid services they provide.
So I had some firsthand experience because I live on Maui, and I was here when the Lahaina fires happened. And, I just was listening to this NPR talk about, learning from your mistakes and making mistakes and the value of making mistakes. And the takeaway was really like, it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay to make them twice. And so, unfortunately, what I've seen is we learned a lot from what happened in Lahaina, which was we lost all the communication. No one had any power. No one knew where to go. And it was actually, heartwarming to see how the community banded together. But we all pay taxes, and we saw what the community did. We just need to do similar. So we would install these mobile power units. It was 2 Tesla Powerwalls on a pallet. We would drop the pallet, put up a temporary solar array, and we had a Starlink comms unit, and people could come to that resiliency hub, power up their phone, actually connect to the internet, and then get important services which other people were providing there. There's no reason why we have solar on every single school in the state, I believe. We have solar on a lot of community buildings. We just need to add batteries. And then and like Colin said, though, that's not an entire plan, but we're in an energy conference, and that can be our contribution, is there's places that will have power if the grid goes down. And I would also say that we are, to someone else mentioned it, let's also give ourselves credit for what we have done. Solar plus storage, DERs, is resiliency. When the power goes down, a lot of homes that had solar in and around Lahaina still had power, and then their friends and neighbors went to their house. So, but they may not have had internet.
Thanks. So we're going to close it up with a lightning round. In one sentence, what is the single most urgent action Hawaii must take in the next 12 months to stay on track for its 2045 renewable energy goal or its 5-year 50,000 target? Start with Colin.
In the next 12 months?
Yeah.
Then I'll say actually achieve and stand up a virtual power plant grid services program that benefits the grid and residents and creates a stable policy for DER interconnection in the state that I hope can remain stable in perpetuity and just continually evolve and become more beneficial and more nimble in terms of the resources that it integrates.
I'll add that we need simplified and compelling programs for DER, CBRE, and wheeling that don't nickel and dime participants on compensation and instead incentivize contributions to the grid.
We need political will. We need to stay the course. We have a goal. We need to veto HB 796, like full stop. And we need to like support the, if the PUC needs more resources to get its job done, but like we need to throw our state resources behind our energy goals, which also are our resiliency goals.
Hear to all three. And now I'll take this opportunity to thank these wonderful panelists for this engaging conversation. Give them a hand. Thank you so much. And thanks to the Hawaii Energy Conference organizers and crew and everyone who put this on. It's been really fantastic, and hope to see many of you at the Wire Pauhana right after this. Aloha, mahalo.